We've had the pleasure of working with Stephanie this year as she's crafted her MFA thesis work. And I just wanted to acknowledge them as very vital components of this process. Stephanie Brown came to us from the Savannah College of Art and Design, where she received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography. While photography remains a foundational tool in her artistic repertoire, Stephanie's expansive curiosity has motivated her to work with a wealth of subject matter and expressions. Her recent explorations examine and question the ways our identities are formed and performed, both objectively and subjectively. Her interest in the physical, social, and political embodiment of identity has delineated a unique path of inquiry for her at the University of Michigan. Over the course of her studies, Stephanie's research and studio practice has concentrated on notions of Blackness, exploring its psychological and social impact through photographic installations as well as 2- and 3-dimensional works. Her thesis work compels us to look at the cultural formation of race and colorism that emerged from the crucible of whiteness, challenging and destabilizing the often unexamined position of white supremacy. She asks uncomfortable questions, forcing us to consider our own role in building, enabling, and perpetuating stereotypes. On the other hand, her work moves far beyond the subject of racial violence, oppression, or discrimination to encompass the complex, nuanced ways that Black identity is both lived and celebrated in all its beauty, splendor, and depth. Stephanie has been a joy to work with. She is an artist of deep sincerity with an absolute regard for the role that art might play in fostering communication across social and cultural divides. She thoughtfully employs visual as well as written language to speak of her experience as an artist living in a contemporary world with irrevocable links to the past. I believe Stephanie is eloquently poised to move out into the world with a vibrant voice and some important things to say. I feel confident that she will grow in stature as an artist, as a scholar, and as an active citizen of the world. It is my pleasure to present to you Stephanie Brown.
I feel like I just won an award. That was really nice. Oh, thank you, Jim, Leah, Marianetta. You guys have been such a structure for me and an incredible team. I do feel like I've won an award just working with you guys and being a part of this. So you can forever claim this and me. Okay. Am I enough? Am I enough is more than the title of my thesis and exhibition, but is also the title of my own narrative, my own lived experiences, and how I make sense of them. This presentation contains 6 parts. First being a personal context to situate my identity, the foundational definitions, 3, an overview of my methodologies, 4, artists and events of influence, 5, a closer look at a selection of my work, and 6, the conclusion. Personal context to situate my identity. Don't be like stupid Black Americans. This is a common line heard among the adults in my family who were all Jamaicans who immigrated into the United States. I grew up understanding I was not and should not aspire to be what they called a Black American, an African American. This was a conflict when my school forms didn't have a Jamaican descendant box to check. It was a conflict when I told my Black American friends that I was Jamaican, and they said, "No, you're not, because you was born in Florida." This was a conflict when on my frequent visits to Jamaica, my accent was not authentic enough to pass, so they deemed me a yardie. Being the last of 5 children and a first-generation American, my upbringing was drastically different from my Jamaican cousins and eldest sister who was born in our homeland. I floated in this space between Florida, Jamaica, and later Africa. I had no knowledge of great-grandparents on plantations. My baby boomer parents never experienced segregation in the civil rights era while in the cradling arms of Jamaica. I didn't know what it meant to be an African American in the full sense of the word, but public school, church, and television taught me. Public school taught me that Europeans explored new lands, civilizing indigenous people. Africans started in chains and slavery was real bad. Lincoln freed the slaves, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks helped African Americans get civil rights, and integration of public schools balanced the educational gap between whites and blacks. Church taught me about white Adam and Eve, white Jesus, white God, and all their white followers and descendants were the beginning of our white civilization. Television growing up in the 90s taught me that brown-skinned people were only criminals or the help. But post-cable box, I learned black families could actually be on TV and even have their own shows. My conflicted identity and unsettled curiosity has led me to research a path long and twisted, repaved again and again. Generations of history, black history, stolen and tainted with lies and false narratives, all to serve one purpose, the destruction of me, mentally and physically. These are questions I constantly ask myself in my research and in my making. Who am I, and where do I fit? What caused our identities to be marginalized? How does media shape a black person's understanding of their own identity? What taught me how to be an African American? Foundational definitions. Please see your handouts. These are foundational definitions that support the heart of my research. Having these definitions will help contextualize my point of view in the research and are free for you to keep. Racism. I utilize a definition of racism from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's 1982 book, ISIS Papers. Welsing equates racism and white supremacy and defines it as the local and global power system and dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival in opposition to the overwhelming majority of people of color in the world. Colorism is understood as a system that grants privileges and opportunities to those who possess lighter complexions within the African American community. Within my research, I explore how colorism is an active system that extends well beyond the African American communities, causing bias and psychological impacts. We see an example of those impacts in the 1940s Clark doll test, which proved that black children had internalized racism by having children select a white or a black doll as the answer to a list of questions they selected. Skin color stratification, as described by sociologist Tyler Matthew, distinguishes persons by the lightness or darkness of skin tone. This phenomena has the ability to operate because of racism and historical ideologies that favor those with light complexions, or whites. Studies show that skin complexion affects women far greater than men in the sectors of beauty ideals, partner selection, and social and socioeconomic status. Doubling. Throughout my work, I recognize the theme of doubling, a term I use to describe the acknowledgement and use of a topic, idea, or object for both of its implicit and explicit meanings and symbolism. This theme is rooted in W.E.B. Du Bois' notion of double consciousness. An overview of my methodologies. I want to solve an unsolvable problem: the constructed global inferiority of dark skin, birthed from the social construction of race and fear tactics associated with dark skin complexions. The problem is layered, and we see it as explicit. My installation aims to expose the implicit aspects that run deep. My work investigates the roots of colorism and its influence on American society. My objective is to put viewers in experiential situations that engage with racial discrimination, skin color bias, and challenges our perspective of persons of color. In my work, I unpack the exploitation of brown skin. By exploitation, I mean the excessive separation of people based on skin color stratification. From explicit to implicit, my art installations disrupt everyday images and replace them with conversational provocations. These works offer to challenge our perceptions of ourselves and others that we believe to be true. My methodologies are rooted in cultural practices and observational research. I record the things I encounter through photographs, video, and audio recordings, and handwritten notes. My observations lead to the creation of prototypes. I put my prototypes into action by seeking feedback and observing how others interact with the pieces. Observations from my early iterations lead to further iterations. Through this back and forth approach, the work evolves. Audience interaction with the work generates for me further investigation. I take note especially of the nonverbal language shared by people of color that I find fascinating and powerful. I sit and wonder how I can harness that power in my work, affirming our melanated experiences as real and worth sharing. The iterations and embedded dialogue around my work has created for me a new notion of doubling, where materiality or context presents a this or that scenario, or evoke an inherent duality. This theme of doubling stems from my own experiences and understandings of my identity as both a Jamaican and an American. I have found doubling to be a major theme, not only in my making, but also a foundation in my conceptual inquiry. Influences. So some artists of influence from the past and present, and also different ethnic backgrounds, have played a large part in informing my making. Kehinde Wiley reassesses representation by painting Black men and women in regal poses of power that directly reference the early masters and traditions in painting. Wiley's figures force a double read, disrupting tropes of traditional portrait painting while uplifting everyday folk as powerful and heroic. Yinka Shonibare. Shonibare questions the meaning of cultural and national definitions, interweaving his British and Nigerian roots. He examines in particular the construction of identity and tangled interrelationship between Africa and Europe and their respective economic and political histories. His signature use of batik, African fabrics, call to attention the adoption of a product that is not even African. Shonibare is quoted saying, "They prove to have a crossbred cultural background quite of their own, and it is its fallacy of that signification that I like. It's the way I view culture. It's an artificial construct." Zanele Moholi, South African photographer and filmmaker, calls herself a visual activist. The photographer confronts racism and violence and the politics of exclusion in South Africa. Her most recent work, Somnyama Ingonyama, translated to Hail the Dark Lioness, includes 60-plus self-portraits which playfully exploit the conventions of classical painting, fashion photography, and the familiar tropes of ethnographic imagery to re-articulate contemporary identity politics. And I quote her here, "I'm claiming my blackness, which I feel is continuously performed by the privileged other. My reality is that I do not mimic being black. It is my skin, and the experience of being black is deeply entrenched in me. Just like our ancestors, we live as black people 365 days a year, and we should speak without fear." End quote. Ava Hess. Hess's strong use of materials such as latex and plastics and forms that suggest representations of the body and various psychological states of being have inspired my exploration with silicone. The Colored Museum, a 1980 play by author George C. Wolfe that demonstrates the common stereotypical misconceptions of the African American experience. Wolfe examines the portrayal of African Americans over time through 11 exhibits or sketches. Each explores and satires prominent themes and identities of African American culture. Exhibit 11 in particular, named Hairpiece, inspired my vanity installation. In The Bluest Eye, Toni Morrison writes testimonies about the ridicule little black girls would face because of their skin and the snooty nature of any mulatto, biracial child who felt superior because of the whiteness in their DNA. Events of influence. Just as various artists have influenced my work has always drawn from historical as well as contemporary events in the world that have been seen as controversial or iconic. In fall of 2017, celebrity Rihanna released her Fenty Beauty line. The line revolutionized the market of makeup, proving that there was a gap that needed to be filled when it came to providing makeup for women of color. Fenty Beauty line boasts 40 shades from light to deep and sold out of its deepest shades first across the nation. In 1 month, Rihanna's sales were 5 times higher than older top-selling brands by the Kardashians, and by the second month, sales were 34% greater. As reported in Glamour magazine, Rihanna is proving the relatively obvious. When your line includes everyone, it pays off. In 2016, a Chinese laundry detergent put out an offsetting commercial of a fair Chinese woman washing a black male in the washing machine with their product, and at the end of the cycle, he was revealed to have become a fair-skinned Chinese man. And of course, the counted and not to be forgotten, men and women. 307 out of 1,146 people killed by the police were black in 2015. 266 out of the 1,096 people killed by police were black in 2016. And just last year, 2017, police killed 1,146 people. Black people were only 25% killed, despite only being 13% of the American population. Greater than the accomplished artists and racially charged events in the commercial world, my work speaks to a lived experience, my lived experience, that I carry because of the feelings that other people hold toward the color of my skin. A closer look at some work. The exhibition Am I Enough challenges the psychological decisions we make as we construct our identities by pulling from dominant media, the judgment of our communities, and self-affirming family values, or lack thereof. In the exhibition, I have co-opted personal and public spaces into participatory installations which harness moments of discomfort to visually entice viewers into contemplative discourse. I use my installations to intervene by referencing and utilizing products that already exist to validate my claim that discrimination based on skin color is prevalent in both public and private spaces. The installations exploit the language and undergirding assumptions of advertising as well as personal scenarios to critique self-esteem and skin color discrimination, as it reflects my own journey in coming to understand how brown skin became inferior. I ask, who told you you are enough? Or you are not enough? And who did you believe? The title of the work, Revolution, was inspired by the dual purpose the term serves. The word revolution is defined as a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system, and or an instance of revolving. This duality lent a hand in interpreting the engagement factor for the work, as well as pointing to it as a catalyst for resistance. The poem written for Revolution was inspired by children's nursery rhymes to point to the playful nature of the work as the original purpose the doll served as a child's toy. I wanted to make a black and white doll, and then I thought about how it would apply outside of America. Here in the United States, our largest racial conflict is black versus white conversation. However, in places like Jamaica, where the majority population is overwhelmingly black, their bias and discrimination is better described as a dark skin versus light skin conversation. Topsy-turvy dolls made in the early 1900s often showed the black side of the doll deteriorated. She had no lipstick, no blush, no eyelashes, and certainly no smile compared to her dolled-up white counterpart. As previously mentioned, beauty standards in America were formed by and for white audiences, which led to black audiences to be perceived as inferior. I worked with a local doll maker and collector to craft the bodies of the dolls. I chose to display the dolls as a manual spinning doll display to break away from our behavioristic norms and gallery settings, as well as give the viewer some authority. I presented them as double-headed dolls on a wall, and it was up to them to quote-unquote play or watch others play. The idea of having to make a choice encourages a viewer to look at their options, and I was interested to see how viewers would behave. I ultimately chose to use only one doll for this exhibition, the Caribbean doll from Jamaica, named Victoria Black, because she mirrored my identity. For an exhibition crafted to ignite conversation about not only colorism, but also identity construction, it became important for me to insert myself, and this doll became my first example of my self-inclusion. The engagement with the doll puts the viewer in a situation of a false dichotomy. Revolution leaves the responsibility of the viewer as to whether or not they will rotate her and choose who goes on top, as if there were only two options. The more difficult discovery is that the doll can be settled in a horizontal fashion, equating the dolls, revealing both of their faces. However, did observing it in a horizontal state tell a viewer that this was a third option, or did the viewer come to that conclusion on their own from the vertical presentation? No matter what a viewer chooses, to engage or not, to turn her one way or another, their behavior reflects a conscious choice they made, a conscious choice they had to make the moment they encountered the work. And any engagement made with the doll, especially in a public space, in a short period of time or a long period of time, made explicit their implicit considerations that churned in their minds the moment they saw Revolution. Shades we wear. To aspire living and existing in a skin different than the one you were born with is not a foreign idea, and far too familiar for any person of color. But people of color are not the only ones dreaming of skin color changes. When developing the work, The Shades We Wear, I wanted to explore the mental choices we attempt to make for supposed happiness, attention, popularity, or for safety. Having lived the experiences of code switching and desiring other skins, I used my own body to create a silicone mold, which I would cast to make my favorite clothing item, jumpsuits, out of skin-like material. The half-day process became performative because I enacted the discomfort of being hyper-aware of my skin. This discomfort would later come to symbolize the same discomfort I try to put forth to my viewers in my work. Casting the mold was a 2-day process. Hand sewing one suit took 8 hours from start to finish. Each suit weighs about 10 pounds. Early versions of the work had garment tags. Each tag read 99.9% silicone and 0.01% pigment to reflect the fact that the human genetic makeup is 99.9% the same. The 0.1% makes up our phenotypic features, yet that very small ratio is used to divide us the most. The wardrobe stands alone at 6.5 feet tall. Inside, warm LED lights illuminate 4 pigmented silicone skins, each carrying a different tone. Their presence in the wardrobe as garment, yet aesthetically appear to be skin, may cause viewers to question what they see before them. The shades we wear acts as an access point to interpreting the scope of the entire exhibition. I decided not to use buttons or zippers because the suits are not to be performed in, nor worn in a literal sense, because this is not an achievable choice, just like how I couldn't become white. These skins represent the desire to change rather than the ability to achieve it. Psychologically, you can believe you are achieving by passing, but that doesn't mean that you are. Do not bleach. I found laundry symbols to be a subtle yet widely familiar visual sign. I intended to eventually work with all laundry care symbols, but after my recent trip to Ghana, where skin bleaching is a health concern, I knew that I wanted to begin with the do not bleach symbol. Coincidentally, while in Ghana, news articles came out that officially banned the dangerous bleaching agent from being sold in the country. However, it would take several years to get them off the shelves of every store and outdoor market stand. Additionally, there was no telling how long it would take for the psychological support of lighter skin to fade. I wanted people to advocate for their melanin by wearing the shirt and in turn take a step toward resisting the inferiority of brown skin. I used discharge paste as a bleaching agent to screen print the do not bleach symbol onto a series of black t-shirts. Once they were printed, I harnessed my artistic roots of photography and set a goal to photograph 50 different people wearing the shirts. In order to accomplish this, I brought my shirts with me home to Florida, New York for winter break. I even brought my shirts with me to Los Angeles and presented them at the College Arts Association Art Exchange event. I set up shop in classrooms, homes, front yards, backyards, city centers, and even in a gallery, telling any person of color that would stop about my t-shirt project and asking if they would pose for a photo. I asked people for a facial expression that reflected how they felt about their skin. For the final display of the shirts, I wanted to co-opt a classic department store aesthetic. I took note of Briarwood Mall displays and shopped official store fixtures from mass retail store providers. I decided on a folded shirt display similar to that of Forever 21. In the exhibition, viewers may encounter the Do Not Bleach shirt display first from outside through the window where the 3-tier display is visible. To the right of the display is a nearly 10-foot long wall by 9 feet high of photographs. The scale of the photographs vary, just as the genders, ages, ethnic groups, and skin tones vary within the photographs. This provided an opportunity for viewers to participate by sharing their selfies on social media or even with friends as a way of continuing the conversation with others. Altogether, this display became one of the most moving pieces in the entire exhibition, pulling viewers into its space because of its scale and an opportunity to connect with human faces. The work holds a grand presence. Mulatto Fast Tanning Lotion. Just as Dr. Cress Welsing predicted, future generations of melanin-deficient people, aka white people, would discard the preference of pale, pasty beauty and return their envy and desire for browner skin. In the 1950s, advertisements, such as one here from Coppertone, targeted white audiences and pushed for sun tanning lotions that prevented sunburn. However, today, there is a new category of sun tanning products, sunless tanning products. These pigmented lotions boast varied shades of brown that can be achieved in just an hour with none of the associated discrimination that comes with the skin color. After shopping for these products online and in beauty supply stores, I decided to intervene in this industry by creating my own variation of this product. I compared bottle designs and created my own version that could pass on a shelf next to other sunless tanning products. I wanted to expose sunless tanning products as a contemporary form of blackface. The third and final photo shoot that I did occurred in Florida. Here I applied the product on 2 young white-passing women. For these shoots, I suggested facial expressions and body language to achieve beauty and fun in the sun aesthetic against a natural palm setting. In between the 2 window panels, a slender wooden and 3-tier glass shelf holds white product bottles with labels that read Mulatto. I wanted the title of this product to carry the weight of a heavy name. Mulatto is a derogatory term once used to describe the offspring of a black and white person. Sunless tanning products promote a sense of agency for users to determine their perfect shade of brown that is not too dark, but just dark enough to be seen as exotic and glowing. This quote-unquote perfect shade is often seen naturally occurring on biracial people and Latin Americans. The agency given of picking your shade is echoed in the tonal bar incorporated on the logo as an extension of the letter T. And I'm going to read for you just a sample of what the bottle says. Mulatto Fast Tanning Lotion. Ideal for those seeking a quick fix tan. Mulatto Fast Tanning Lotion allows you to obtain an authentic variety of shades and hues that you dare to love. From the light, sun-kissed glow of a house slave to the deep earthen brown of a field hand, you can control your shade. How to apply? You don't. You suck it up and accept the skin you've been dealt. Every day, I look at my skin. I wake up to my brown, I go to town with my brown, I shower with my brown, I go to bed with my brown. I do not have the privilege of choosing how dark I get to be. No timetable to explain the levels of brown I can achieve. I came into this world like this. Sports in the Sunshine State tanned me a little bit. Yeah, I know, black people tan too. I wear SPF to protect this brown. After years of internal warfare, I accept the environment's natural impact on my brown. But when will you? The how to apply directions reveal a change in tone, calling out those who tan by demanding that they accept their skin in the same way I have to live with mine. The warning label on the product continues to speak to the alarming yet real, very real consequences of having brown skin in America. The quote-unquote ingredients of the product are listed as insider knowledge, a nod to the pain of people of color, to the pain that people of color endure, as well as humorous ingredients that make light of stereotypes associated with black bodies in America. This work has the potential to ignite dialogue about what it means for a white person to desire browner skin for fun, while real people of color secretly desire whiter skin for safety and peace of mind. Looking Glass. Nearing the end of my term, I looked over the works I knew I would include in the I Am Enough exhibition, and I started to notice a doubling in the context and content of every piece. I also felt this crucial perspective was not being explicitly discussed. I wanted to create a piece that spoke directly to this idea of doubling, which I found as a common thread. The decisions I made in the other pieces were strategic to address skin color discrimination, bias, and appropriation. Yet I needed to ensure that the crux of the work in regards to complexity of identity construction was also being presented. Similar to the shades we wear, I needed a piece that would examine the mental space of a person of color, in particular their double consciousness. In his 1929 book, The Souls of Black Folk, W.E.B. Du Bois coined the term double consciousness. And I quote, "In a particular sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals, and one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." Looking Glass honors the double consciousness of a person of color with specific regard to the intersectionality within a Black female who is simultaneously an American, a Negro, and a female. I decided the context would be a vanity table, a place where a woman primps, fixes, decorates, and adjusts their look before a mirror. In early drawings, I decided two identical vanities and prescribed personalities to the different Black women would embody them. The dichotomies varied at first. One confident in her skin versus one who lacked confidence, light skin versus dark skin, one woke, one unwoke, and the final verdict, enough versus not enough. I listed products and items that would belong on a vanity and coordinate with one of the two perspective personalities. In the final exhibition, Looking Glass is the first piece you see when you enter the gallery. The positioning of this piece emphasizes how the private looks out into the commercial within the context of the exhibition as well as in the real world. The piece consists of two white vanity tables divided by a 24-inch by 36-inch two-way acrylic mirror. The two-way mirror allows you to see yourself as well as the other side of the vanity, which suggests that no matter what side you find yourself on, you have to look at yourself as well as look through and out to others. The presence of the furniture isolates the experience you have with this work in comparison to the openness of other wider pieces like the Do Not Bleed shirt photo display. Looking Glass provides an empty chair on either side in front of the vanity facing the open journal and an invitation to have participants sit and reflect. A few symbols to note in the work. The chairs, on the Not Enough side, this chair was upholstered in a Chinese imported faux African wax print purchased in Ghana. The symbol on the chair means the ladder of death, which in Ghana depicts the story of judgment time when everyone passes on. The color of the material in red and black are also customary funeral garb colors. The opposing side of the vanity has a chair upholstered in a Ghanaian trademark wax print, and a blue color, which is a Ghanaian symbol for love. The African American flag can be seen here as well. This personality, this is on the You Are Enough side, is knowledgeable of systems of racism and resists the pressures to alter her blackness to satisfy a status quo or beauty standard set by white dominant culture. The vanity on this side is covered in sticky notes in the colors of red, green, and black, and form the African American flag created in 1990 by artist David Hammonds. The sticky notes pressed under the glass to memorialize the flag share a variety of quotes from today and several decades ago. I'm going to share with you an entry from the journals that I collected. On the side that asks, "Who told you you are not enough?" Christina Morton responds, "Those who are intimidated and afraid of which they cannot control or comprehend." In another response, "Who told you you are enough?" Someone responded, "My husband, my daughter, and all the fierce lady bosses in my life who put their faith in me, who invested in me, who mentored me." Black Girl Diary, an autoethnography. As I unpacked colorism and its influence on American society, I also unpacked myself internally by recording and documenting collections of quotes, personal observations, and life anecdotes that came to mind during my research and making process. Every different iteration of the works, I jotted my thoughts down on sticky notes, napkins, and the margins of class notes as they would come to mind. I later compiled them and organized them into one chronological Bildungsroman document. Black Girl Diary, an autoethnography, portrays a transformation of self that I argue occurs during the construction of one's identity. By addressing personal moments and a variety of experimental written forms, I make it easier for people of color to relate and find themselves within my narratives, which offer moments of agency, self-reflection, and ownership. I'm going to read an excerpt for you from page 7, which is the Blue Family Portrait. At 14 years old, on one of many visits to Orlando, my siblings decided to take a new family portrait in a last-minute effort gift to my parents. In the master bedroom of the house, someone pinned a blue plaid fleece blanket to the wall to act as this pseudo-professional backdrop. We filed into the space, oldest to youngest, careful not to spill outside of the fleece borders pinned taut to the wall, and smiled for the camera, controlled by a family friend. We wore our giggles and cheesy grins, a few funny poses to ease the tension in our faces, and one last cheese that ended the mini session. I was cool until I saw the images on the back of the camera. Immediately, I identified a blemish on the screen, my face. There I was, the darkest one in line, the end of the line. Tiny round glasses with chunky teeth. How could I be related to the beauties before me? My too dark, my too small, my not enough, stacked at the end of the photo tormented me. I threw myself on the couch in a fit, bawling, tears rolling down my now dusty cheeks. As I made a scene in the living room, no one understood why, and no one tried to find out. My outburst believed to be just another teenage episode. They never cared when I cried. I wanted to stop breathing, and I tried that night. Later in the second half of the book, I have a section titled Confessionals. On page 28, you can see, "Did you cut your hair?" I hate that. On page 39, while presenting my artwork to a white woman at a residency in Ghana, she commented, "Wow, I wish I could make political artwork." I responded, "I wish I didn't have to. I wish I had the privilege not to." To conclude, my work argues that skin color discrimination is not just a historical issue, but one of great relevance today. It portrays how Black identities are constructed. Our constructed identities shop from everyday life, media, products and therefore reflect the racial, tonal stereotypes that thrive in commercial industries. My work validates my claim by revealing anecdotes of external factors that influence people's understanding of themselves. Viewers get to share moments in life where a person, their skin color, or lack of representation told them that they were not enough or that they were not capable of their aspirations. These experiential works engage with racial skin color discrimination by making implicit biases and private internal doubts explicit in public. Like a light turned on in a dark room, I intend for my installations to take viewers from empathy to civic action, suggesting alternative perspectives and leaving room for viewers to insert themselves into the work through personal narrative and/or participation. I confront the hard questions in order to present them to my viewers and spark a dialogue that can reach broader communities beyond the museum. My exhibition stirs up dialogue. The work argues that these conversations need to be made explicit. Just as we carry it from private to public spaces and back again, my work offers an opportunity to bring it to the surface and keep it on the surface. This is the only way things may change. Looking forward, the strength of my work rests in its eagerness to intervene into the world by a way of social art pedagogy that I have adopted into my art practice. I believe my calling is to utilize art forms that transcend ethnic groups and foster dialogue and growth surrounding the themes of racial identity construction, implicit and explicit bias, skin color discrimination, and its influences on our self-esteem and perceptions. To close, I would like to end with one of my favorite thoughts from James Baldwin. In his essay, Letter from a Region in My Mind, he explains that the black man can never be fully liberated unless the white man comes to accept all that he is. I believe that the public influences the private, the same way that the biases white people feel toward black people can also influence how black people choose to regard themselves and others. Everyone becomes complicit in the construction of one's identity, no matter which constructed racial box you choose to subscribe to. Thank you.
At this juncture, we can open it up for questions.
Please, not all at once.
Oh,
Becca. Thank you.
I'm curious, so I was thinking about sort of branding attempts to present a like simple or clear narrative as a way of telling a story or like persuading people to consume something. How are you thinking about branding within your show, considering that you had like multiple components, each of them with sort of like a slightly different story?
That's a great question. One of my biggest struggles, because I was incorporating commercial aspects as well as private aspects, I was like, oh no, I don't want my whole show to look like a store. But then dealing with that question also made me deal with the relationship between these public and private spaces. So what I did is that, very subtly, but I created a mother brand for all of the brands that were there. So Created Brown is a little logo that is on the bottles, mulatto. It's also on the t-shirt products as well. So that was my way of kind of unifying the brand, but also showing how one brand can put out two very different messages. Does that make sense?
A question then about how the skins fit into it, because that was the one element of the exhibit where I felt that it was sort of more of a sculptural object rather than a commercial product. It didn't
Sure.
have sort of the architecture around it that made
So for me, the wardrobe piece was like my closet. So its proximity to the vanity piece also became important as well, seeing how you might get dressed, then sit at a vanity, or sit at a vanity, then get dressed. I also had to make strategic decisions so that it didn't swing in the commercial realm, which is why it didn't have any tags to suggest that it hadn't been worn before, to kind of give that wear and tear to it. But I saw it fitting in as what that person would be sitting at, what I would choose to dress myself to go out into the day for whatever occasion it might be.
Given all of your research and I wonder, at this juncture, are there new questions that have been raised for you that you think in the future you would like to grapple with?
I don't know if I would call it new. I think there are bigger questions. I think I had to get very narrow for the purpose of this exhibition, but also to be able to like share a concise message. But there are bigger questions that I have that I'm interested in exploring, which, for example, my kind of side project that I've worked on with Return the Melanin, and just seeing the impact of skin color perception and self-esteem through spiritual figures in Christianity. That's something that I'm very fascinated in. You know, who was benefiting from a white Jesus, and who made that decision, things like that. So I guess I feel like I need to understand, so there are some questions I'd like to explore in a broader sense that all relate to what I'm looking at right now and what's going on right now.
Thank you for your fascinating talk, and well constructed discussion about how you developed your subject matter. I was thinking about the exhibition a couple of years ago of Kerry James Marshall and his retrospective in Chicago and in New York. And what was really fascinating about that exhibition was he only painted black people, black
Right.
figures. And room after room, painting after painting, there were only black figures. And so in a couple of his interviews, people were asking him, do you ever draw white people? Do you ever draw other colors? And he found that after years of painting in his community and his history, he only painted black figures. And do you, to kind of, in light of that, how he approached his artwork, I was wondering if you feel as though you want to address other ethnic groups, or to address this idea of color in the black community as a sole subject matter.
Sure. I would love to dive into other ethnic groups. The more I travel, actually that's kind of, traveling is what inspired me to come get my MFA in the first place. It also has frustrated me the most into this field of inquiry that I'm in. I think that by exploring that, it's a great opportunity to actually unify groups of people, because Black people are a minority here in this very small context of the United States of America. We're a global majority, but there's also so many groups of people and regions of the world where they don't even identify themselves as a person of color, or they don't even identify or acknowledge or even aware of being a product of the African diaspora and having those roots. So to kind of fill those gaps, I think that that's what keeps me interested. and wanting to explore those other ethnic groups, I guess, because in a way I feel like there's no such thing as not enough Black representation. So by doing that, I think that's a great way that I can, even if it's just to bring up the dialogue of, hey, I see you as a person of color, even if you don't, and let that kind of sit within themselves and to question, well, why don't I see myself as a person of color? You're welcome.
Public and private.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have room to write down all the different times that became a critical point in what you just gave us.
Mm-hmm.
And also in thinking about your thesis exhibition.
Sure.
During one of the critiques, there was discussion of how what Rebecca alluded to is the difficulty of branding something that slides back and forth
Mm-hmm.
from different levels of private to public. It seems like that's really at the heart of your project.
Hmm.
And something that anybody can take away, no matter what level of awareness.
Right.
I am, at the end of this, going to ask you to comment on it, but I want to say, I think art famously blurs the boundary between public and private. Sometimes defies that boundary
Mm-hmm.
explicitly. And that might be part of the power of an experience of art, is the way it does that. So, you've talked a lot about public and private, self-perception, the perception of others, it goes
Right.
through so many levels. Is there a way in which you could just comment in a summarizing way on
How they marry.
the power of that for you, public and private?
Well,
The way you set up your exhibit, the way you thought about each of those elements.
sure. I think what's coming to mind for me is like the easiest summary, if you will, is that my own identity construction has gone from private to public and back and forth. I don't think that it doesn't, that back and forth doesn't end. So as anyone is constructing their identity, it's kind of like trying on different hats. Maybe I'm having this mood or this attitude, or I'm talking this way today, and the next day it's something else, and then at home you take on a totally different character. I think we change up whether we're aware of it or not based on the people that we're around. So there goes that outside influence on how you're acting. But then there are other people who are able to really hone in to know this is me, all day, every day, no matter where I go. And I think that awareness of your identity and how you choose to present that identity is hard for people to even consider. Does that make sense? It's a start.
No, it's like your position in American culture at this moment is forcing you to deal with something that's an issue in one way or the other for all of human existence. Public and private selves. But you're pointing out a problematic that is more than a matter of, say, social shaming. If I perform something private in a public context, you're pointing out that there's danger. And
Right.
I'm gonna follow up on that.
Okay.
I was just curious if there was sort of a chronology of moving from public to private in your work. I know in reading over your autoethnography that there's a sort of discovery that some of the things you're making were very personal, and I didn't know if there was something that through the process of making, sort of public sort of becoming more private. Was there like a shift that happened? As you were working, where you just realized that there were these two realms that had tension?
The shift came in seeing how I was sheltering my own side of the entire subject matter. So I would argue that a lot of the work had a more public thought process. For me, I'm going to put out this commercial looking thing in this public piece that's going to speak to all different types of people in different ways. And I actually had a really great mentor of mine. She came to visit. Her name's India Beale. And when she was just kind of looking over all the works that I was doing, she's like, "So where are you? Like, I see you and I hear you when you explain it, but where are you like in this actually, like explicitly?" She's like, I know that you're in here because I know you, but how do other people? And she kind of called me out on the whole idea of, if I'm wanting other people to feel discomfort, am I feeling discomfort? What am I putting on the table that is pushing that? So it made me revisit a lot of pieces and really start to have that dialogue that it wasn't about picking private or public, but it was understanding the relationship between both of them and how they work together. And that the benefit of me sharing more of my private was actually to a greater service to my viewers, for my people of color viewers, because it gave them agency. It gave them moments that reading something and seeing something so specific to my experience directly echoed their own, which allowed them to weave together the different pieces in the exhibition with their own narratives, looking at mine.
I'm going to just peel off that because it's related
Sure.
to the question I wanted to ask. How do you know?
How do I?
How do you know that that's happening? How do you know that others are coming and weaving things together based on your experience? How do you know that your experience ends up being significant to someone who's coming to view?
Sure. I know by what they tell me and what's written. So one of the beautiful things in the Looking Glass piece, I asked one question in either book, who told you you're enough, who told you you're not enough. I got more than just responses to that question. I got people telling me their story that had nothing to do with my question. I got people thanking me for an opportunity to just consider that question. So I guess
So I think I would make a distinction between a prompt,
Okay.
which I would call it a prompt, and the autobiography or autoethnography. At one point, I think it was near the end of your presentation, you suggested that the only way you could do this is through yourself, by using yourself as the example.
The only way I could do.
I should reference it because I don't remember exactly what you said.
Okay.
But it, and I guess I wonder about I wonder what significance that has and how much it's worth thinking about, the difference it makes to use oneself as the source of the experience. And I think there is an assumed authenticity to that. And I think the friend that you were talking about who was questioning you about that, I think those are wise questions. That as you pinpoint what it is you actually want to say, or what it is that you actually want to provoke, thinking about the different ways that could be done, one of which is your story.
Right.
But is that then the most effective way to do or to get the results that you're looking for?
Right. I would agree. I don't think that that's the only way. I think that, for example, for particular pieces, that method was beneficial in this iteration of the work. But there are other pieces where no, maybe a different way would be better. Like I think that the tanning piece takes a very different route than the vanity piece does. And the t-shirts do something very differently. But I do think that there's a power in specificity, and that when you can get very specific, instead of me trying to prove a point or validate a point or provoke something in a broad sense, if I can get narrow, whether it's through my perspective or another, doesn't matter. But if I can be specific, I think it's easier for other people to see themselves or not see themselves.
Yeah, to me, that's worth looking into a little
For
bit
sure.
more. The assumption that the unique individual experience is indicative of the common communal experience.
Right.
Do we know that that's the case? And if that is the case, what are the ways that we could best take advantage of that?
I think it's just I think it's good to explore just so that you can compare, right? Because I don't think it is always the case. But it's a fun experiment.
One of the challenges on the design side of these presentations is understanding the what and the how the designer's doing. I find on the MFA side, the question is the why you're doing what you're doing. So for me, you mentioned, I think, solving the unsolvable, moving from empathy to civic action, spark a dialogue, ignite conversation. So I guess I want to know a little bit more about what you want, to talk more about why you're doing what you're doing and what outcomes you want, and to what degree that you're able to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for, if there are.
Sure. I might have to have you repeat part of that. So I'm going to kind of work backwards. I'm not fully convinced that I have a particular way to know for sure that I'm achieving what it is that I might want to achieve. I think that I'm doing what I'm doing because I think that the questions are worth asking. Very simple, plain questions that refer to things that we just kind of do, like not even being aware of or subconsciously. Judgments that might be passed, assumptions that just come to mind, whether we believe them or not. I just feel like by questioning those things, by questioning the decision, I don't know, like, why did I choose not to wear lipstick today? Why do I want to wear lipstick? Why do I shave my legs again? For what? Whether it's hair, physical, who we talk to, or even a feeling you might have when a certain person enters the room. I just think it's worth questioning, why do I feel that way? And in questioning why you feel the way that you feel, I think those are moments for you to, or for any person to just kind of, start to unpack what influenced that. If I said, well, why do I want to shave my legs? What told me that I need to shave my legs? And who is that benefiting again?
I guess part of it, my question is, like, you talk about conversation, dialogue, civic action, and I guess I'm wondering where that is in the mix. If
Sure.
this is, if self-reflection is the road to that, or
Sure.
what?
So some of the pieces, so I'll use Shades We Wear in particular. So that wardrobe piece was the first time that I considered using the artwork as a tool. Like, this is a thing that I made, but let's just look at this and talk about this to have dialogue about what that work was doing. So I use that work as a tool or a catalyst to have like a roundtable discussion with people as to, you know, did you ever feel that you wanted to change your skin color, and why? What was your first time is a question that we kind of passed around. What is it, what occurred, or what happened, who said that your skin was a problem, or that, you know, you were an other of some sort. So I guess in that respect, I'm wanting to create dialogue. I'm interested in how these works, or how any work can foster conversation when you ask those questions, even if it's just conversation within yourself. But if you're thinking about it, then that's an opportunity to have that conversation with someone else as well.
Okay. I just one last thing.
Sure.
It seems like these are important, right? And you care about this,
Yeah, I do.
these conversations. And this is something that in my area of interest in design, where designers are trying to become more activists. The
Mhm.
question is, to what degree are you then actually helping facilitate those conversations? Exhibition is a mode, and then you mentioned workshop, roundtable, and so
Right.
for me that's and the construction of those, I think, are important for achieving some of these goals that you mentioned, and I just didn't hear as much about the work on
Sure.
that end, and that's why sort of where my inquiries come from.
Yeah, I think that's something, like I mentioned, looking forward, that's something that I'm really interested in pursuing. Using these works that I've made and then taking them outside of exhibition mode, and what life can they live in a different space to have these conversations, because some of the conversations that I have, it being in a gallery is not going to allow me to have those conversations. But if I took it to a laundromat, if I took it to a school, you know, then we're doing something different.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome.
So kind of on that, and kind of where you're going, so sort of I see 4 different gestures or even strategies used, which go beyond the typical, it's a photo or sculpture, which
Mhm.
would be what we might call the art object, this idea of pedagogical or workshopping through that, commercially viable products, even though mulatto isn't.
Sure.
The t-shirt, I would argue, activism with the do not bleach even kind of as a hashtag.
Sure.
And then open, prompted, or participatory. So if we start looking at these as unique gestures, I'm curious what your thoughts in as an artist in these kind of identified. You know, is that something you think through? I mean, how do you think through all of those moving forward, as opposed to drilling deeper into any one of those, as using all of these gestures to get an idea across? How are you thinking moving forward after your MFA? Having tasted them or tried them, I mean, is that now your practice? Are there gestures or strategies you're still thinking about? And is it all art still?
I would argue that it's still art. I think whether or not it's art is all like an intentional question, right? Like between the artist and whoever the maker is. I do think all of those modes are fascinating, in that depending on like the objective for a particular piece, I might hone in on one particular thing. I think looking forward, I'm interested in, trying to think how to word this. I think I do use all those modes. I think that they're worth exploring. For me, I feel like it's like by whatever means necessary, you know? So I'll use the shirts, for example. The shirts being in a gallery is cool, great, but when I'm in a mall or, you know, like a pop-up shop in a community setting and I can sell it, to get more bodies in it is spreading that message, is, you know, just for me to stand there at a stand and someone's like, oh, tell me about this shirt, is an opportunity for me to share that message. And sharing the message is, I would argue, is a part of my objective. Is to, hey, think about this. This is what's happening. This shirt maybe you can use this shirt as a tool to have that conversation. Or even if you don't want to have that conversation, just by wearing it on your chest, you become this walking billboard of advertising that. So that's where I feel like that strength would be in a commercial object like a t-shirt, and the benefit of that being sold. But that would, I mean, that could live online, you know, that could live in a store. It could live in a various different spaces to kind of push that across.
But maybe I'm also interested in for you, what is the relationship between them, as opposed to, yes, they're dealing with the same topic, but they could be considered very discrete things that I know you as a t-shirt
Oh, I
person,
see.
but I don't need to know you as, you know, the exhibitionist or the artist, right?
Sure.
It could still function.
Right.
Is there interest in, or what is your interest in the four having a certain relationship? I mean, I just.
Sure.
But it could
I mean,
these different, very different sort of gestures.
Yeah, I think all those gestures are subtle ways of utilizing art, or just taking hold of a message and putting it forth in different ways. Yeah. Frank.
So this is very simple. It has to do with your title. I know that in art, there are no conventions in terms of how you tell your work, And I read Am I Enough? And the first time I saw it, I almost intuitively wanted to put a question mark.
Mhm.
So where is that question mark? Is it, did you forget, or did you just intend to?
Yeah, the question mark was left off intentionally. That was me playing. It can be read, like you said, you kind of intuitively turned it into a question, but I think it can be read in a different way as well. And then I continued to play with it, also with how it was laid out in the exhibit, with having that two-way mirror and seeing it reflected. But yeah.
There's a sort of impulse to totalize, to sort of talk for, you know, people that look like you or something, and I think that Alona's point was maybe sort of hidden that way. I actually think there's in your work there's a sort of pivot in the other direction, and I think it could stand to go even further that way, because I think a lot of the time you're talking specifically about what it means to be a non-white woman, because I think if you were thinking about the way that particularly black athletes are represented in the United States,
Sure.
It's a different thing, and it's not a sort of universal thing. And I think the fact that you're coming from a post-colonial diaspora, you know, this legacy of empire, is a different focus which is coming through in your own family history, you know, which is perhaps why the African American thing doesn't really fit, doesn't really work.
Right.
And so I think the specifics of your own lived experience actually resist that sort of totalizing nature of, you know, I'm going to speak for everyone, you know, that apparently on the surface look like me. Right. And I just think that particularly at this moment in the United States of America, at the moment there's a sort of heightened sensibility of, like, you know, what's happening in terms of race and politics. And you know, I think there's probably an impulse within yourself not to fragment the thing, but I think actually within your own work and your own story, I think some of the richness comes from the specifics of your own experience, rather than, as it may seem, there's no generic sense of this. That wasn't really a question. It's just
Sure.
It's an observation about what I see playing out in your work.
Yeah, thank you. Rowan, did I? Oh, sorry, I thought I saw your hand.
I mean, I had a thought earlier, which was sort of a rhetorical question.
That's okay.
But it's not really for you, it's more for like everybody.
Okay.
Just like, is art results oriented?
Oh, is it results oriented?
What do you mean by results?
Because talking about that, I think I'm not saying, I will say nothing, I mean, something different from what other people have said already.
Okay.
I think what happens with the work is that it's interesting, but it's somehow scattered in the sense that you said, okay, I want like focus on the particular, right? So each piece will do something specific, but it's not specific enough. Oh, this is what I was like thinking. So I'm coming from a culture that has racism and colorism like deeply instilled.
Right.
And what came to my mind while you were talking is that the situation in which you go this summer break and people really want to like be darker because being darker means that you have a higher status.
Right.
You have the economic possibility of like going to the ocean and spend some time there.
Right.
Otherwise,
Leisure.
you are a rat office rat, right? And then I was like wondering, because when I grabbed the lotion like bottle that day, I got it right away, but also was like thinking that, okay, you have this particular vision of or value, or you know what's positive and what is negative, and you're imposing that through that message. But that didn't sound to me at that moment like, oh, it's about a conversation of this, because you know it can be situated in different places in different times and have like different types of conversations.
Sure.
But while you were talking, I imagined like, yeah, this room like with kids, and you know, and like the different garments, like you know, and just a visual reference to start a conversation. I guess the point I want to make is that it is kind of like it does depend on each person to get a particular, you know, outcome or result, whatever that means. But what I think that you're not acknowledging that much, and maybe I'm wrong about this because I didn't read your thesis, is how you talking about particular cases that is difficult to connect all together, and also each case can be framed differently depending on the context in which you're going to deploy.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the only concern I have about your work. That how critical are you being to say, this is my scope, and I have to acknowledge that this will work in this way for this context with these people, and outside of this, I'm not sure what I can do, or this is what I can do perhaps. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I've thought about a lot. And what can be frustrating is when you have to get so narrow. So for example, like when picking areas of like different things to read, you know, for the purpose of my thesis, or great examples that I'm finding, it's like, oh, no, that's in South America. Oh, nope, that's in Africa. Wait, like the conversation changes so drastically by region, by age group. I mean, you name it.
No, and when I meant context, with this example of the summer break, is that it's not the same issue when you go and try to find a job, for example, or when you're supposed to be the preferred kid within your family.
Right.
I mean, that's what I mean, that the thing
Because it's more like
changes,
class?
Yeah.
Are you referring to like because of the class structure?
No, like the like cruel comment that many Mexican families have, that the blondest kid is the preferred one because
Right.
it's wider.
Right.
Yeah, so how the situation varies, that's kind of like, you try to cover too much, I understand, you know, but.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I will say that I acknowledge how that conversation changes. And I actually did some of this research. At a residency in Mexico, and that kind of brought a lot of that to the forefront for me. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, congratulations.
All right, I think we're done.
Thank you.